Maggie Johndrow, my sweet, sweet friend. She is a financial advisor and is going to give us some smart financial tips that we all should be making during this time. She's going to take a look at the economy. She's also going to take a look at the markets, let us know what we shouldn't do, talk about our savings, all of that stuff. How's it going?
It's good to see you.
It is so great to see you. What's new? How's life?
Life is good. I'm quarantined with my husband and my dog Red, who you know,
Yes.
and that keeps us busy. I mean, I take lots of walks with Red, so I think that keeps me sane. How are you doing?
I am, I'm hanging in there trying to navigate this technological world. I feel like every day I'm like, oh, I have it. Like I got a grasp on it, and then like 2 seconds
Yeah,
later, something implodes. And I'm like, you know what?
I just think everyone's sitting at home trying to figure out technology together, so don't even worry about it.
You know what? That makes me feel a lot better that we're all in this together and we're all
We
just kind of
are.
hanging in there. But if people have not seen you on our show before or are not familiar with you, even though they very well should be, I would love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about what you do, what a financial advisor is, and where you work.
Yeah, sounds great. So as you said, I'm Maggie Johndrow. I'm a partner and financial advisor with Johndrow Wealth Management. The firm was started over 30 years ago by my business partner, who also is my mother-in-law. So it's a family
Mhm.
office, Lori Johndrow. And I joined her about 4 years ago after working on Wall Street in New York City. So I love the question, what does a financial advisor do? Because I think that there's a misconception that only the super wealthy can afford or need a financial advisor. While of course there is some truth to that, right? When you have a lot of money, you need to be thoughtful about what you're doing with it.
Right.
Financial advisors can also help create financial plans, right? So let's say you are working and you want to know when or how or if you can retire if you're on a good track, or let's say you're a parent and you want to send your kids to school, we'll help plan for that. So it doesn't have to be just for the uber wealthy, and we help a variety of types of clients and have a lot of different services for different people. So if you've ever had financial questions or want to know if you should budget differently or how to meet certain financial goals, you should talk to an advisor.
And you are the person that they should talk to. Maggie is fabulous.
Thank
Any
you.
question about finances that you might have, she always has a great answer. And I think that it's
Oh,
important for people to be more financially savvy, because I think a lot of us just kind of push it to the side. Oh, we'll deal with that later, until something happens. And then they're like, man, I wish that I had someone to fall back on and get advice from. But especially during this time, I feel like a lot of us are making maybe rash financial decisions
mm,
because we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Maybe you're dealing with job loss and you're trying to navigate your new norm and figure out what you can and can't afford and where you can take risks and where maybe you should be a little safer. Tell us a little bit about why we shouldn't be making any rash decisions financially when something as crazy as a global pandemic is going on.
yeah, great point, Taylor. So this pandemic, while feels like very long, in the grand scheme of all of our lives, is going to be a short period, right? If you think of past recessions, whether it was 2008 that lasted a couple of years, but following 2008 was 11 years of a phenomenal economy and market growth, right? So while the recession lasted, about 4 or 5 years in 2008, we had 11 years of phenomenal growth. So don't let something that feels so real right now, but will ultimately be a short-term event, affect your long-term plans. And I think that's really where working with somebody is helpful, because you can create a plan that takes you from now until you're 95 years old.
Mhm.
And you'll see that, yes, this is scary, but you're still likely on the right track to kind of attain that financial life that you'd like. So to your point, for some, making some financial decisions now would be helpful. Let's say you lost your job, maybe you should look at your budget, for example. For others, maybe it is a good time to invest some money that they've had on the sidelines. But for many, staying the course is the right answer. And it feels like we should be doing something, but often doing nothing is the best course of action.
So, in terms of your savings, I think if anything, working from home and maybe spending a lot less than I normally do, it's really drawn attention to the fact that I don't focus as much on putting a little in every single month to kind of build up my savings? Why is it important for people to do that, not only during a global pandemic, but just in general, in case something happens and you need something to fall back on? Why is it so important to build your savings account up?
Right. So people think about the stock market and they see it decline as it definitely did in March, right? We saw some record lows and they get very anxious about it. And then the question I usually ask is, well, are you using that money in the next 6 months or 12 months? And often people say no. And that's why you need that emergency savings account, because then I remind those clients that, oh, but haven't you been saving, and don't you have 6 months worth of living expenses in something that is liquid, meaning easily accessible and not tied in the stock market? And they're like, oh yeah, that's true. And so then you, one, have more peace of mind, right? That not all that money is tied up in the stock market, and not privy to those fluctuations. And then two, God forbid you do lose your job or you're furloughed right now.
Right.
You do have that savings account to fall back on. So it's really, we tell people, in good times, we usually say 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. But in harder times like now, it makes a lot of sense to have 6 or even 12 months worth of living expenses in cash and in something like a traditional savings account, for example.
And I think you've talked about it before, but we've also talked about it on the show, how important it is to budget. And I always said, oh my gosh, well, there's no way I can afford this. There's no way I can afford that, because I thought that I had this budget in place. Well, ever since I started working from home and not going out as much, I have been saving so much money, which means that I've been spending
congratulations.
No, thank you so much. My parents would be so happy to hear that too. But yeah, my mom was always right. Like, Taylor, you eat out too much. Like, now I know I do. I really do.
Yeah.
Why is it important to make a budget for yourself in a time like this too? And maybe not during a global pandemic, but I feel like people have this idea in mind that, oh, I can't afford this and I can't afford that, when really they're spending in really bad places, and they could easily, tweak some things here and there.
Yeah, so I never think of spending as bad or good. I just think of it as a choice that you make, right? So for some, travel is really high on their list. For others, eating out is really high on their list. But right, we all have scarce resources, meaning we only have so much in the pot, right? And so how you decide to use that is your choice, but having an understanding of where that money's going gives you so much control, right? So what I usually tell people to do, and now's a great time to do it because many of us are sitting home, right? And can't leave. I tell people to download or look at their last 6 months worth of spending, right? So many of us use a debit card or a credit card. Download those statements and see the line items, right? And then categorize them, right? So restaurants will go into eating out, movie tickets will go under entertainment. And then of course, things like rent or a mortgage or car loan payments or student loan payments go under their own categories. And then I usually take an average, right? So if we're looking at 6 months, you take that total amount, divide it by 6, and that's your monthly average. And then you can see, where your money's going. And if you're absolutely okay with it going to eating out because that's what makes you happy, great. But understand what that number is. And maybe you're right. Maybe you spend, I don't know, $500 a month going out to eat. And you're like, you know what? I could spend $250.
Yeah.
I don't need to spend $500. It just means like 2 nights in as opposed to going out 4 nights, a month or whatever. And I think that's important because now you have control and you're making a choice for yourself. And then you get to decide, hey, where's that extra $250 going? Is it going to savings? Is it going towards a goal I have, towards a trip, towards paying off debt? So I think that's why it's really important. And now you have more time. Many of us have more time than ever to really understand where our money is going and make sure it's going where you want it to go.
And fantastic advice as always. And Maggie has a really great page with just little topics of the day to kind of help you navigate those situations. It's Johndrow Wealth, correct?
Yes, Johndrow, JOHNDROW, Wealth, so 2 W's. Yes, and we try to post every day. We'll have tips. Our recent questions was, should I be rebalancing my portfolio? Another, there's been a lot about the CARES Act, which of course is the $2 trillion stimulus package that was passed not too long ago. We try to do informational videos, and I try to bring in other partners, attorneys, accountants, and things like that. So that, these are unprecedented times. I think people are nervous. And so I'm trying to get as much information out there as possible to kind of give people some sort of comfort.
No, I mean, it absolutely does. And the format is very simple so everyone can understand it. And Katie said, thank you, Maggie. Great advice as always.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you, Katie.
Fabulous. And if any of you have questions, feel free to comment them below if you have any financial questions for our friend Maggie here. What I'd like to know, and I don't know if this is a broader question, but it looks like I got a itch. That's usually what happens with the doorbell. What I want to know is, I mean, we're looking right now, unemployment numbers seem to be rising. And I think that means a lot of us are looking at what this economy will look like when maybe states do reopen. I mean, should we be worried? Is it going to be difficult for us to be able to get everyone back to work? I mean, how does a global pandemic impact the economy? I know that we brought you on before to kind of talk about the markets. Should we be worried, I guess is the question.
No, it's a great question. So it's a good reminder that the economy and the markets aren't the same necessarily. Now, often we do see them move in lockstep, right? You saw that for the last few years. The economy was good, unemployment was low. We were kind of hitting the metrics of what is a good, quote unquote, good economy. And the market was also rising. But right now we're not seeing that completely translate. So while March was a terrible month for the markets, April has been one of the best months in the markets since the Great Depression, believe it or not.
Okay.
So, but yet we're getting these record unemployment numbers coming out. Just this week we had another several million people apply for unemployment benefits. So you might think to yourself, well, why is the market going up? Yesterday we finished up again, but yet we have this dismal economic news. There's a lot of reasons for that, but to answer your question about the economy, listen, before the pandemic hit us, we actually were at a record unemployment. So traditional economists have always considered full employment, meaning anyone that wants a job can get a job at about 4% unemployment. And the reason that is there's always people that are out of work for whatever reason, whether they're seasonal workers, they're students, they're stay-at-home parents. So you're never going to have, or economists believe you'll never have 0% unemployment. So in February and January, we had unemployment at 3.5%. So, I mean, these were record lows for unemployment. So now we're closer to 20% unemployment. So you can see that big disparity. But the thing is those numbers aren't reporting those that are furloughed versus truly laid off. Okay. And, I think most businesses' intention is that if you were furloughed, once the pandemic is over or more under control, or we have more testing, and businesses can reopen, those people will regain their jobs. So keep that in mind when you see these unemployment numbers. It's not truly that those jobs have been eliminated. It's just they've been put on pause. Now, that being said, are we going to get back to 3.5%? Probably not anytime soon. And that's simply because, that was kind of an unrealistic place to be long-term anyway. Yeah. So, I don't have better answers. Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball to know, which jobs will truly be eliminated versus not. But I do take some comfort in knowing a lot of those furloughed workers should be able to go back to work once we reopen.
That's really good insight. Now, Maggie and I have been working on a piece just talking about the ways in which different industries have had to pivot and kind of get more creative while working from home. And I'd love for you to share some stories that you have with us about ways in which you've been able to still work with your clients virtually and give them that peace of mind and give them that comfort that they need about their finances while working from home.
Yeah, no. So the beauty of our industry is we already had all of our remote working process in place. Sure. So we didn't skip a beat. In fact, I think we decided to send all of our employees and work from home even before it was mandated. It was just suggested. So we've been doing it for 2 months now. And thankfully, no one, we've been able to still provide the same sort of service. Zoom is obviously our best friend. That's our platform of choice. But we've done webinars. In fact, I'm going on and doing another webinar tomorrow at 12 noon. So check out my page and you could join that. We have been doing, like I said, we had a shell of an Instagram account before this just because we've been so busy. But being home, we've been able to work on that and send out a lot of information that way to our clients. We've taught some people to use Zoom for the first time. A lot of grandparents thank us after, and they're like, now we can use this with our grandkids and blow kisses to each other. So it's really sweet to be able to do that. And then I think I mentioned, while it's kind of common that the super wealthy work with financial advisors, we've tried to be more accessible to the whole public. And so we have this subscription service, which is a monthly amount you pay, kind of like your Netflix or your Hulu subscription. And then you get access to a financial advisor and you can ask them advice, any advice on your finances. So that has always kind of been in place, but it's become so much more popular because, again, I think people are nervous about their finances, do want some of that advice, and it's all done remotely. So we do screen sharing, video conference, and it actually was done remotely prior to. So again, everything was in place there. And, we're able to work across the country. We have clients that have moved and they still are our clients. We have clients all the way in California and LA. So again, really lucky that we already had this sort of work from home platform and work remotely platform in place.
I think it's so cool the way in which you've been able to make your services more accessible to people.
Yeah.
And I just am very thankful that you were able to come on today because this was a fabulous discussion. And I hope that for those of you who were watching, you took some knowledge away from it. Maybe it gave you some pause to look at your finances and the way in which you're living your life and your budgeting and whatever. Before we go, maybe some tips, maybe like 5 tips that you have for people during this time when they're looking at their finances, just important information that they should keep in mind, but 5 tips that they should remember.
Okay. So one is, I think now is a great time for you to revisit your budget, which we already talked about, but I want to drive that home because even if you are in a good place with work, we don't know what the future holds. So understand what is a necessity and what is a want, right? Yes. Where could you cut back versus where can't you, right? Mm-hmm. 2, definitely bulk up that emergency fund, which we talked about as well. I would suggest 6 months to a year of your necessary living expenses. So that of course includes debt payment, mortgage or rent, food, those things that you really need to live. 3, a lot of people ask, should they be investing now? While there is some benefit, right? Stocks are on sale because the market has gone down. Be careful of getting caught up in kind of the momentum investing, meaning, oh, this new company has a drug that might, cure COVID-19 and I'm going to buy that stock, or, this company is being used a lot right now because we're staying at home. Instead, you want to remember your own risk tolerance, right? So how much market risk and volatility can you tolerate in good and bad times? And 2, you want to pick companies that have really solid track records for much longer than just this period of time. So that's 3. 4, I would say brush up your resume now and start networking now. So even if, again, you feel secure in your job, start reaching out to your alumni networks, to your organizations you volunteered for, to past colleagues, because again, we don't know what the future holds, but you want to have those connections solidified before you are in a position where you really need them. And not to mention, be open to opportunities during this time. Some of the most popular companies that we use today, like Airbnb and Twitter, for example, were created in the years post 2008. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of creativity that comes out of market downturns. So remember that. And 5, I would say practice some self-care when it comes to your finances. So talk to professionals. Most people will give you a free consultation. I know we do. And definitely think about where you're consuming your information, right? New information is coming out every day. So you just want to make sure you want to have like your 2 favorite sources that give you solid information. Turn off, all of your notifications and just go to those sources, once or twice a day, because, I think we all can get a little overwhelmed with everything coming out by the minute.
Maggie,
So
you were fabulous. This was such a good conversation. Great advice. I hope that
thank
everyone was,
you.
because I know I certainly was. It's made me think a lot. So if people want more information, she commented her handle below. If you scroll up a little bit, it's Johndrow Wealth. But make sure to reach out to her. We could all use some great financial tips during this time, and it's important to utilize a financial advisor if you do need one. Maggie Johndrow is your girl. So Maggie, thank you. And I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.